I'm Mara. I'm 31 years old. For years ago, my father cut me off so completely that I might as well have died. No calls on my birthday. No texts at Christmas. No, how are you? Just silence, clean, deliberate, and surgical, the way only a man who has practiced cruelty until it looks like discipline can manage. 7 weeks ago, at 7:45 on a Tuesday morning, he walked through the door of my coffee shop with a leather portfolio under his arm and a stapled contract he expected me to sign. 15% of everything I'd built. That was his price for walking back into my life. He didn't know I owned the building. Before I tell you what happened when I slid that contract back across the counter, let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened that Tuesday, you need to understand the 18 years that came before it. Before we go further, if you've ever had a family member show up and try to take credit for something you built entirely on your own, please take a second to like and subscribe. Only if this story resonates. And drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where you are while you're listening to this. My parents, Daniel and Carol Pierce, built their lives around a very specific image. My father was a commercial real estate developer in Portland, Oregon. Not the biggest name in the room, but big enough. The kind of man who wore Brooks Brothers on weekdays and expected his handshake to be worth more than any contract. He drove a black Mercedes S-Class, replaced every 3 years without discussion, and spoke in declarative sentences the way other people breathe, without thinking about it, without needing a response. My mother, Carol, was what people used to call a homemaker and what I'd call a full-time image consultant for my father. She planned fundraisers for organizations she didn't care about, maintained friendships with women she didn't particularly like, and smiled at parties with the specific wattage of someone who has learned that the right smile can paper over almost anything. They had 2 daughters. Leia is 3 years younger than me. Blonde, photogenic, comfortable in crowds. By the time she was 16, she'd learned to work a room the way my father did, scanning for the most useful person and moving toward them with a smile already assembled. She played soccer in high school, not because she loved it, but because the college application photos were good. She was my parents' favorite. Not because they sat down one day and decided it. It was quieter than that. It accumulated, the way water damage does, invisibly, until one day the ceiling comes down. I was the other one. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it the way a contractor describes a load-bearing wall. It's structural information. I was the older daughter who preferred books to parties, who spent Saturday afternoons at the kitchen table with graph paper and colored pencils designing floor plans for houses that didn't exist. I was the one who got straight A's without anyone asking to see my report card. I was the one who came home from the regional science competition with a second-place ribbon and held it up in the kitchen doorway while my father glanced up from his laptop. That's nice, Mara. He didn't ask what my project was about. He went back to his screen. I was 11 years old. I stood there for another 30 seconds waiting for more, then walked to my room and put the ribbon in the bottom drawer of my desk where I kept other things that didn't fit anywhere in our house. That was one moment. Let me give you 3 more, because patterns only become visible when you stop explaining them away as coincidences. When I was 14, I was accepted into a summer architecture program at Reed College. It was competitive, 47 applicants, 12 spots. I told my mother at dinner. She said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then turned to ask Leia how soccer tryouts went. Leia made JV. She didn't make varsity. My father stood up and started talking about getting her a private coach. I ate the rest of my dinner without speaking. When I was 17, I received a letter from the principal of my high school. I'd been selected for an academic achievement award, top 10 students in the school. The ceremony was on a Friday in April. My mother attended Leia's spring dance showcase that same afternoon. My father had a client dinner. I sat in the 3rd row of the auditorium next to my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Holloway, who had nominated me, and when they called my name and I walked across the stage, she was the only person in the audience who already knew to clap. She squeezed my hand when I sat back down. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said. "The ones who do the work quietly are the ones who build something real." I remembered that sentence. I kept it like I kept the ribbon in the drawer for later. When I was 18, I got into the University of Oregon's architecture program, full merit scholarship. I told my parents over dinner. Architecture, my father repeated. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a diagnosis. Real estate adjacent, I offered, trying to speak a language he'd respect. It's not the same, he said, cutting his steak. Leia's interested in business administration. That's a career. Leia was 15 at the time. She hadn't decided anything yet. But my father was already building her future in his mind, and I wasn't in the blueprint. I went to college on my scholarship. I called home twice a month for the first year. By sophomore year, once a month. By junior year, I had stopped expecting the calls to feel like anything other than a transaction, me reporting in, them waiting for me to finish. One person was the exception. My grandmother, Eleanor Pierce. My father's mother. She was 78 years old, 5 feet 2 inches, and possessed of a clarity that could stop a room. She lived in a craftsman bungalow in southeast Portland with a garden she tended the way other people pray. Peonies, lavender, climbing roses along a cedar fence. She smelled like soil and cedar and the particular clean scent of someone who has stopped pretending to be anything other than exactly what they are. She came to my college graduation. She was the only family member who did. My parents sent a card. They were at a property investment conference in Scottsdale that weekend. I have the card somewhere. I kept it, not because it meant something, because it documented something. My grandmother sat in the folding chair in the sun for 3 hours in June heat, wearing a lavender blouse and sensible shoes, and when I walked across that stage, she stood up and clapped with both hands above her head. Afterward, over lunch at a small restaurant near campus, she leaned across the table and said, "I know what they do. I know how they've treated you. I want you to know that I have argued with your father until I have no words left. He doesn't hear me." She wrapped both hands around mine. "But I hear you, and I see exactly who you are." She paused. Then she said, "When they finally see your worth, it will be too late for them." I didn't understand what she meant then. I understand it now. I moved to Portland after graduation. I found a job at a small architecture and interior design firm. Entry-level, answering phones and running prints as much as drafting, but I was in the door. I rented a studio apartment on Southeast Division, 380 square feet, radiator that clanked through the night, a window that faced the brick wall of the building next door. It cost me $890 a month. I made $18 an hour. I did not ask my father for a single thing. Not money, not contacts, not a reference. I knew what those gifts cost. The separation from my family didn't happen all at once. It happened the way most permanent things happen, as an accumulation of small refusals until the weight of them reached the floor. What broke it open wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no confrontation at a dinner table. It was a conversation that lasted 11 minutes on a Tuesday evening in February, 4.5 years ago. I know the length of the call because I looked at it afterward, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, unable to make myself go inside. I had been working at the design firm for 2.5 years. I had also, for the previous 8 months, been running what I called a side project, but what my colleague and closest friend, Priya, called the thing that's actually going to be your life. I had been developing a concept for a coffee shop, not because I had any experience in hospitality, because I had found a narrow corner unit on Alder Street in the Pearl District that was failing as a juice bar, and I could see, as clearly as I could see anything, what it wanted to be. Warm light, calm music, a chalkboard menu that changed, a place people came back to. I had saved $22,000 over 2.5 years, eating lunch from home, driving a 2013 Honda Civic with 112,000 miles on it, buying nothing I didn't need. I needed $18,000 more to cover first, last, security, initial equipment, and operating cushion. I called my father to ask for a loan. Not a gift. A loan. With a repayment schedule I'd already drafted. Mara. His voice was what it always was, measuring, slightly impatient, performing patience. Dad, I have a business plan. I want to walk you through it. I'm asking for an $18,000 loan at whatever interest rate you think is fair. I have projections, a coffee shop. Yes. Silence. Then, you have an architecture degree. I know what I have. Mara. And this is the part one remember most clearly, because of the specific quality of dismissal in his voice, not angry, not even unkind, just certain. In the way that only people who have never been wrong about something actually important can sound certain. You're not a business person. You never have been. I'm not going to fund something that's going to fail in 18 months. Dad, I've made my decision. Declarative. Final. If you want to come back to Portland and work in commercial real estate, I can find a role for you. Something practical. I'm already in Portland. Something, he repeated, louder, practical. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, I understand. And I hung up. That was the last time I asked him for anything. Here is what I didn't say on that call. I had already been in contact with a man named Ray Okafor, who owned 3 commercial properties in the Pearl District and 1 in Selwood. I had met him at a property management seminar I'd attended on my own time, paid for with my own money, because I wanted to understand the language of the industry my father thought I didn't belong in. Ray had listened to my concept for 40 minutes over coffee. He had looked at my projections. He had said, "You've done your homework. Let's talk about the Alder Street unit." I didn't tell my father this because it wasn't his information to have. I told him nothing. 2 weeks after that phone call, I secured the lease on the Alder Street unit with Ray. The terms included a business rider, a clause that approved commercial coffee operations, covered the equipment I planned to install, and authorized the minor wiring upgrades I needed for the espresso machines. Ray signed off personally. Everything was approved. Everything was filed. I used my $22,000 savings as the deposit and operating fund. I bought used equipment from a cafe that had closed in the Alberta Arts District, 1 grinder, 2 espresso machines, a commercial refrigerator. I refinished the counters myself over 3 weekends. I rewired the pendant lights with the help of a licensed electrician I paid $1,200 to, with a permit pulled from the city. I built the chopboard menu frame from reclaimed wood I found at an architectural salvage yard on North Williams. I named it Riverside Coffee. I opened on a Thursday morning in April, 3 years and 2 months ago. 11 customers came in that first day. Priya was one of them. Ray stopped by in the afternoon and drank an Americano standing at the counter, looking around at what I'd done to the space, and said, "I knew you'd make this work." I had no money left. I had inventory for 4 days. I had a savings cushion of $1,400. I didn't sleep a full night for 6 weeks. And I didn't call my father. Not when we had our first profitable week, $4,200 in revenue, $2,100 in expenses. Not when Grant, a writer who worked from the corner table on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, became the first customer to bring a friend specifically to meet me. Not when I hired my first employee, Nina, a barista with 3 years of experience who had just moved from Seattle and wanted to work somewhere that felt like it had a soul. I didn't call because the silence, by then, had calcified into something mutual. My father did not call either. Not when my grandmother passed away 14 months after I opened, a Tuesday, the same day she'd always done her shopping, as if her body kept the schedule even at the end. Not when I sat in the 3rd row of the funeral, near the back, and watched my father give a eulogy about a remarkable woman dedicated to her family. I kept my face still. I had learned, by then, how to keep my face still. The lawyer called 3 days after the service. My grandmother had left me $340,000 in a trust she'd established 8 years before her death. The document was on cream-colored paper, notary's red seal from the state of Oregon. Her signature in blue ink, steady, deliberate. The lawyer said she left a letter as well. I read the letter in my car in the parking lot of the attorney's office. "My dearest Mara, I know what they did. I know about the loan, the dismissal, all of it. I argued with your father until I had no words left. He wouldn't listen. This money is yours, no strings, no conditions. Use it to build the life you deserve. I have watched you from the beginning, and I want you to know I always saw you. I still do. When they finally see your worth, it will be too late for them. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." I sat in the parking lot for a long time. Then I drove to Ray's office and told him I wanted to exercise the right of first refusal clause we'd discussed when I first signed the lease. He'd mentioned, during our original negotiation, that if he ever moved to sell the Alder Street property, he'd give me the first opportunity to purchase. He hadn't been ready to sell then. He was now, or rather, the original owner of the building had approached him about transferring the deed, and Ray was ready to restructure. We formed a property holding LLC together. Ray brought the existing relationship with the building and his commercial lending contacts. I brought $280,000 from my grandmother's trust as equity. The deed transferred. The owner entity changed. My name was on it, not as a tenant, as managing member. I told no one in my family, not because I was planning anything, because they had forfeited their right to know. I need to pause here for a second. If you've ever built something real, something brick by brick, dollar by dollar, with no net beneath you and no one in your corner cheering, and had a family member look at it and see something they could take, drop a fire in the comments. And if you think my father is about to learn something irreversible, type karma. Keep watching, because what happened next, even I didn't fully see coming. Let me tell you what Riverside Coffee actually became before I tell you what happened that Tuesday morning. By the end of year one, we were averaging $6,800 per week in revenue. By the end of year two, $9,200. By the time my parents walked through the door, we were doing $11,400 a week with a loyal base of regulars, a waiting list for weekend tables, and a Yelp rating of 4.8 stars across 312 reviews. Nina had become my lead barista and de facto floor manager. She had a gift for remembering orders before customers could give them and a calm that the room absorbed. I had also hired 2 part-time baristas, a weekend baker named Cass who supplied us with pastries from her home kitchen under a cottage food license, and a part-time bookkeeper named Wei who came in on Tuesdays to reconcile the previous week. I was 31 years old. I owned a coffee shop and co-owned the building it was in. I had $61,000 in a business account and $47,000 in personal savings. I drove the same Honda Civic. I had not bought a single luxury item. Not because I couldn't, because I was building and I knew what happens when you drain the foundation before the walls are finished. Priya remained my closest friend. We had dinner every other Sunday. She was the person I called when something good happened and the person I called when something frightened me. She knew the full history with my family, not because I told it dramatically, but because she'd been present for enough small moments to assemble the picture herself. "They're going to show up someday," she said once, over wine in my apartment, which by then was a 1-bedroom near Ladd's addition with a small porch and a monstera plant that had survived 2 years of my inconsistent attention. "People like your father, they always show up when they smell success." "I know," I said. "Are you ready?" I thought about the binder I kept in the lockbox under my office desk. The leases, the permits, the LLC documents, the property records, the contract with Ray. "I'm ready," I said. What I didn't know, and what I want you to understand before I tell you what happened that Tuesday, was that my father had been watching. Not watching me specifically. Watching the business page I'd made for Riverside Coffee. I'd posted our grand opening. I'd tagged the location. I'd done what any small business owner does, documented the milestones publicly because that's how people find you. My father had found me. I learned this later. But on that Tuesday morning at 7:45, when the bell above the glass door rang and the air in my shop changed the way it does before a storm, I didn't yet know how long he'd been circling. I was at the espresso machine when they came in. My father first. Broad shoulders, expensive coat, a charcoal Burberry I recognized because my mother had pointed it out at Christmas 3 years before the silence began, proud of it the way she was proud of everything that proved they were doing well. His walk was the same as it always was, measured, proprietary, the walk of a man who has decided before entering any room that it belongs to him. My mother beside him, smiling too brightly, eyes scanning the room. Not absorbing it, cataloging it. And behind them, my younger sister Leah, 28 years old, phone raised to chest level, filming. Not openly, not like a journalist. Like someone who expects to capture content. They didn't wait in line. They moved straight to the counter, smiling at my customers the way property owners smile at tenants, warmly, from a position that assumes elevation. My father's voice filled the room. What a cute little place. Loud enough for the laptop crowd to hear. Loud enough to be performance. We're so proud. My stomach tightened. My hands stayed steady on the milk pitcher. Grant, my regular writer, looked up from his corner table and glanced at me confused. He knew my face. He didn't know my history. I gave him nothing. My mother smiled at a woman waiting for her latte and said, loud enough that the woman smiled back reflexively, "Isn't it charming? Our daughter is so entrepreneurial." Our daughter. For years of silence, and now I was a possession again. A thing to display. "Can I help you?" I said. My father's smile disappeared. He reached into his leather portfolio and placed a stapled packet on my counter. Not set it down, placed it with force, with intention. The pen cup rattled. "Sign this," he said, dropping his voice. "Not enough. 15%. I looked at the top page without touching it. Riverside Coffee LLC. Partnership agreement. My name was in bold, already written in, as if I'd already agreed. My mother's smirk settled into place. Leia's phone tilted to catch my face. "Why would I sign over 15% of my business to you?" I asked. My voice was flat. Informational. My father's eyes went cold. "Because I can make one call," he said. "And you'll be out of this space by the end of the week." He let that land. "Then, your landlord. Tonight, I tell him you're violating your lease. Unapproved subletting. Unsafe wiring. Whatever I need to say. You think he'll fight for you? He'll protect his building." My mother's smirk widened. "You're just renting," she murmured. "You don't own anything." I looked past them at my customers. A couple had stopped talking. A woman at the window table was performing the act of not listening very badly. My father leaned on the counter like he belonged there. I slid the contract packet back toward him using the edge of a napkin. I didn't touch the pages. "No," I said. "Then I call him." "Sure," I said. "Let's call him." My mother blinked. Leia's filming hand paused for half a second. My father hadn't expected agreement. I watched him recalibrate, then decide that agreement was still a performance opportunity. He pulled out his phone slowly, like he was savoring it. "Fine," he said. "You're about to learn how the real world works. Put it on speaker," I said, "so everyone can hear what you're about to do in my shop." His eyes flashed anger, then calculation. But the customers were watching. Refusing would cost him the performance advantage he'd already committed to, so he tapped speaker. The ringtone filled the room. 1 ring. 2. Then Ray's voice answered, gravel-edged and alert. "Yeah, this is Ray." My father's smile sharpened like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. "Ray," he said warmly, pitching his voice for the room. "This is Daniel Pierce. We need to talk about your tenant." I didn't speak yet. I let Ray respond. "My tenant." A pause. "Which one?" "The coffee shop," my father said. "Riverside Coffee. I'm her father. And I leaned toward the phone, calm. "Hi, Ray," I said. "It's Mara." My father's head snapped toward me. My mother's smirk froze. Ray's voice changed immediately. Not confused. Not neutral. Recognizing. "Mara," he said. "Hey, what's going on?" And in that single word, "hey," I heard something my father wasn't ready for. Not the voice of a landlord dealing with a complaint. The voice of a partner checking on someone he knew. My father's smile began to crack. He tightened his grip on the phone. "Ray," he said, sharper, "I'm calling as her father. I'm informing you there are issues you need to." Ray cut him off mid-sentence. "Who is this?" Ray asked. Tone flat. "Daniel Pierce," my father repeated. Forced politeness. "Her father." A pause. Then Ray said the thing that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "I don't deal with fathers," he said. "I deal with my tenant, Mara. Are you okay?" My mother's smile faltered. Leia's phone lowered a fraction, then corrected. "I'm fine," I said. "They walked in and threatened to call you unless I signed over part of my business. I wanted you to hear it directly." Silence. Then Ray exhaled, slow, annoyed. "All right," he said. "Daniel, you still on speaker?" My father stiffened. "Yes." "Good. Then you can hear me clearly." Ray's voice dropped half a register. Not louder. Colder. You don't get to threaten my tenant, and you don't get to call me about her lease unless you're her attorney with written authorization. My father's jaw tightened. He tried to recover. Ray, I own multiple properties. I know how leases work. She's in violation. You don't know how this lease works, Ray replied. Because I wrote it. Mara's lease has a business rider. It's approved. The wiring was inspected. The permits are filed. I signed off personally. My father opened his mouth. Ray didn't let him use it. And Daniel, if you call my number again to harass her, I'll treat it as interference with contract and hand it to my attorney. I don't play games with people who try to bully women in my buildings. My mother's cheeks went faintly pink. Leia's phone shifted, catching my father's tightening expression. My father tried a different angle. Softer. The one he used when authority didn't work and he needed something else. Ray, you don't understand the family situation. Mara is unstable. She makes impulsive decisions. We're trying to protect her. Ray laughed once. Short. Humorless. Protect her, he repeated, by extorting 15% of her business in the middle of her shop. My father's lips pressed into a line. You're not protecting her, Ray said. You're trying to steal from her. I didn't react. I let the sentence exist in the room. It sounded different coming from someone my father had expected to control. Ray's voice shifted toward me. Mara, do you want me to come down there? No, I said calmly. I want a record. You got it, he said. I'm texting you right now that your lease is secure and that I do not recognize any calls or claims from them. Save it. Thank you, I said. Ray paused, then added, and Mara, if they're threatening you, call the police, not me. My father snapped. The mask went. This is ridiculous, he hissed into the phone. You're overreacting. It's a family matter. Ray's voice didn't move. Family matters don't include extortion, he said. Goodbye. The call ended. The speaker went silent. For half a second, the only sounds in my shop were the soft hiss of the espresso machine and the faint clink of a spoon in a ceramic cup. Someone pretending nothing had happened. My father stared at his phone like it had turned on him personally. Then he looked up and his face shifted into something uglier than anger. Calculation. Cute, he said softly. You think you're safe because your landlord likes you? My mother's smirk returned, thinner now. You always find a man to hide behind, she murmured. I didn't respond to that. I didn't defend Ray. He wasn't a man I hid behind. He was a contract, a permit file, a business writer, a paper trail. My father wouldn't have understood the difference. My father tapped the contract packet again. Sign, he said, louder now. Or we'll do it another way. I kept my voice flat. What other way? His eyes went bright with spite. You're running your little shop under an LLC, he said. I know you're the registered agent. I know what you filed when you formed it. You think I can't touch you because you learned to make lattes. My stomach tightened. But I stayed still. You haven't been in my life for 4 years, I said evenly. How do you know anything about my filings? My mother's eyes flicked to Leia. Leia's filming hand trembled slightly, then steadied. My father's smile sharpened. You posted your grand opening, he said. You tagged the business page. You're not as invisible as you think. His voice dropped, vicious and casual. I can file things too. I can make your business look non-compliant. I can trigger an audit. I can make your merchant account freeze. I can make your suppliers nervous. He was describing institutional harassment the way some people describe the weather. I stared at him. So you came here to extort me and threaten fraud, I said. He shrugged. I came to claim what's owed. 15% or you lose everything. I didn't look at the contract. I looked past him at my customers. They were watching. Not all of them. Enough. My father had made the mistake he always makes. He thinks witnesses belong to whoever has the loudest voice. Witnesses belong to whoever has proof. I picked up my phone, opened my PS dashboard, the back-end admin view, and tapped the ownership and compliance tab. Not dramatically. The way I check inventory. My father's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? My mother scoffed. Your little app won't help you. I walked to the end of the counter, opened the small office door, and pulled a thin binder from the lockbox shelf. Not a dramatic evidence folder. A real one. Leases, permits, vendor contracts, LLC documents. I returned to the counter and opened it to one page I had printed months ago and never expected to need. My father stared at it, confused. What is that? My landlord's ownership statement, I said calmly. And the property manager's authorization letter. He narrowed his eyes. Why would you have that? I slid the page toward him. Because I don't build anything without a paper trail, I said. He glanced down. I watched the exact moment his confidence shifted because the name on that letter wasn't just Ray's. It included the actual property owner's legal entity, an LLC I recognized from my county record search when I first negotiated the lease. It wasn't Ray's personal holding. It was mine. My father blinked hard. What is this? He said, quieter now. Ray isn't just my landlord, I said. He's my partner on the building. My mother's smirk froze. Leia's phone dipped. Partner, my father repeated. I nodded once. And if you threatened to call my landlord, I added, you're threatening me. He stared at the letter like it had changed languages. Partner on the building, he repeated, too quiet to be performance now. That's not how leasing works. It is, I said evenly, when you stop leasing. You're lying, my mother murmured. But her voice had lost its ease. Prove it, my father said. I nodded once, like he'd asked for a receipt. I opened the binder to the tab I'd labeled months ago and slid a single page forward. A recorded deed summary from the county portal. Legal description. Owner entity at the top. Stamp was real. Names were not negotiable. My father's eyes dropped. Then he blinked hard because the owner line wasn't Ray. It wasn't Riverside Coffee. It was the property holding LLC Ray, and I had formed after he gave me the right of first refusal. My name, not as tenant, as managing member. So you bought the building, my father said. Like it hurt him to say it. I secured the building, I corrected. I secured my business. My mother's smile went sharp again, forced. With what money? She whispered. You didn't have money 4 years ago. I held her gaze. I had time, I said. And silence. My father moved fast then. Into a new tactic because he could feel the first one dying. Fine, he said, louder, reinflating. You think you're untouchable because you own some bricks. You still have a business license. You still have taxes. You still have compliance. I can make your life expensive. Health department, fire marshal, labor board. I can call your suppliers. I can call your payment processor. I can make you look risky. My mother nodded slightly, like a tuning fork. How? I asked. I can report you, he said. I looked at them for a long beat. Sure, I said calmly. Do it. I held his gaze. Put it on speaker. Right here. In front of your audience. He wanted me scared. He wanted me begging. Instead, I was inviting him to leave fingerprints. He didn't like that. So he reached into his portfolio and pulled out a second packet. Thinner. Stapled. He placed it on the counter like a weapon. This isn't a threat, he said. This is a filing. I didn't touch it. I read the title from where it sat. Demand for membership interest transfer. Riverside Coffee LLC. My chest tightened. But my posture didn't change. You can't demand ownership, I said. I can file, he replied. And filing creates problems. My mother tilted her head. You didn't think we forgot you, she said softly. We were watching. Waiting. Leia's phone zoomed toward the packet, trying to give the internet the impression that paper meant authority. I didn't argue the paper. What agency did you file with? I asked. Secretary of State, he said. Change of control. You think you're the only one who knows how to form an LLC. I reached under the counter and opened the locked drawer. Not because I needed anything from it immediately, because the drawer also held my phone charger, and that meant I had a reason to be there. More importantly, it gave me 30 seconds to let the weight of what he'd just said land properly. If he had filed anything with the state, it would leave a trail. And if he'd done it wrong, it would leave his name on the mistake. I opened my registered agent portal app. Tapped entity notifications. Nothing yet. No new filings. No approvals. When did you file it? I asked. His eyes flicked away for half a second. This morning, he said. Before we came. I nodded once. Kept scrolling. Then my screen refreshed. A new alert populated at the top. Red flag icon. Urgent filing attempt detected. Change of registered agent / control request. My father's face tightened in real time, like he could feel the system moving under him. I tapped the alert. A details page opened. Timestamps. A reference number. And one line that made my throat go cold in a controlled way. Submission source network. Riverside Coffee Guest Wi-Fi. I looked up at my father. Then I looked at Leia. Her phone was still up. Her thumb was still moving. She wasn't filming anymore. She was typing. At my counter. Right in front of my customers. Using my shop's Wi-Fi. My mother's mouth tightened. Leia, she snapped. Not performative. Alarmed. Leia froze. Phone halfway down. I kept my voice calm. You were filing, I said. My father's eyes flashed. That doesn't prove anything. I tapped the next line. Submitted name, Daniel Pierce. Submitted email, Daniel Pierce. Two-factor verification sent to owner of record. Status, pending. I turned my screen slightly so he could see his own name sitting on the attempt. You filed it under your name, I said. From my guest network. My father stared at my screen like it was a knife he hadn't seen coming. My mother's face went pale. In a small, private wave. Then, you idiot, she hissed at him, under her breath. Leia's phone shook slightly. Her filming angle was gone. Her confidence was gone. All she had was panic. Delete that, my father barked. I didn't move. I can't, I said calmly. It's a registered agent alert. It's preserved. It includes timestamps and a reference number. He leaned across the counter like he might grab my phone. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull back. I lifted my chin toward the ceiling. Cameras. We had them for the register, the seating area, and the front door. My customers knew it. My staff knew it. My father hadn't thought about it because people like him only consider surveillance when they're the ones using it. Nina, my barista, glanced at me from the espresso station. I gave her one small nod. She reached under the counter and pressed the silent security button we'd installed after a break-in attempt the previous winter. No alarm. No drama. Just an automatic call and a timestamp. My father straightened, sensing something shift. Not knowing what. My mother forced sweetness back into her voice. Mara, she said, why are you doing this? We're your family. I looked at her calmly. You walked in here to extort me, I said. Now you're committing filing fraud on my Wi-Fi. My father's face twisted. You think a little paperwork alert scares me? I can still ruin you. You're already doing it, I said. And you're doing it on camera. His eyes flicked upward for the first time. The small black dome above the corner of the counter. Then the bell above the door rang again. This time it wasn't a customer. A man stepped inside wearing a suit that didn't belong to the street. Mid-40s, charcoal, clipboard tucked against his ribs. His eyes moved once across the room, counter, cameras, customers, then locked onto my father like he'd been given a photo. He walked in with a destination. He approached the register. Daniel Pierce, he asked. My father's posture stiffened. Who are you? The man flipped open a badge-style ID card on a lanyard. My name is Elliot Crane. Business Filings Compliance. I'm here regarding an urgent attempted change of control filing connected to Riverside Coffee LLC. My mother's face tightened. Leia's phone dipped, then rose. Elliot looked past my father and met my eyes. Are you Mara Pierce? Yes, I said. He nodded once. Ma'am, we received an automated fraud trigger from your registered agent portal. An individual attempted to submit a change of registered agent and executive control. The submission originated from this location's guest Wi-Fi network. I need to verify whether that filing was authorized by the owner of record. My father snapped. This is private. Get out of here. Elliot didn't move. He turned the clipboard toward me and pointed to a reference line. Reference number, he said. Timestamp. Network source. Submitted name. I leaned slightly and saw the same details my phone had shown, only printed, formal, and worse. Submission timestamp, 9:12 a.m. Network, Riverside Coffee Guest Wi-Fi. Submitted by Daniel Pierce. Status, verification pending / fraud review initiated. My father stared at the page like a trap he hadn't seen closing. My mother tried. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "We're family." Elliot's eyes didn't flicker. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "family is not a filing authority." My father tried again. "Authority posture, different angle. I'm her father. I have a right to protect the family's interest." Elliot nodded once, like he'd heard this exact line 100 times. "Then you won't mind providing identification," he said. "Because right now you appear as the submitting party on a suspected fraudulent filing attempt." "I'm not giving you anything," my father said. Elliot's gaze shifted to me. "Ma'am, if you confirm this was unauthorized, we file a formal fraud affidavit with the Secretary of State and preserve all related records, including IP logs and surveillance time windows." "It was unauthorized," I said, "and I want everything preserved." My father snapped. "Don't you dare." I didn't look at him. I looked at Elliot. "Proceed," I said. Elliot nodded once, then glanced at the ceiling cameras. "Your cameras cover the register area?" "Yes," I replied. "Good," he said. "We'll include a preservation request. If law enforcement needs footage, you'll have it." My father's eyes flicked upward, realizing, too late, that his visit had become an evidence timeline. My mother leaned in close, voice low and venomous. "You're going to regret humiliating us." "You humiliated yourselves," I said quietly. "On my Wi-Fi. Under my cameras." Elliot turned to my father again. "Sir, I need your name confirmed for the record. If you refuse, I will note non-cooperation and proceed with the fraud report under the submission data we have." "You're threatening me," my father said. "I'm documenting you," Elliot corrected. My father's hand twitched toward Leia's phone like he wanted her to stop recording. She didn't. She still thought she could turn this into content where I looked like the villain. Then the front bell rang again. 2 uniformed officers. Not rushing. Controlled steps, scanning eyes. Officer Ramirez walked in first. Officer Chen followed, hand resting near his radio. Ramirez approached the counter and looked at me. "Ma'am, are you the owner?" "Yes." "Are you safe?" "I'm safe," I said calmly. "They're my family." They came in and threatened extortion, and then attempted a fraudulent business filing from my guest network. Ramirez's gaze shifted to my father. "Sir, step back from the counter." "This is a family conversation," my father snapped. "She's overreacting." Officer Chen didn't blink. "Step back," he repeated. Calmer. Firmer. My father hesitated long enough to show he was calculating whether the badge would bend for him. It didn't. He stepped back. Ramirez looked at Elliot. "Who are you?" Elliot showed his ID. "Business Filings Compliance. I'm here on a suspected fraudulent change of control submission tied to the business." Ramirez nodded, then turned to me. "Do you want them trespassed from your property?" I didn't look at my mother. I didn't look at Leia. I looked at my father. "Yes," I said evenly. "And I want it documented that he attempted to force me to sign over 15% of my business." Officer Chen pulled out a notepad. "What was the threat?" He said, "Sign over 15% or I call your landlord tonight," I said. Then he attempted to file a change of control request from my guest Wi-Fi when the landlord threat failed. Ramirez's eyes tightened. "You have cameras?" "Yes. And the registered agent portal has the filing attempt log with timestamps." Chen turned to my father. "Sir, do you have identification?" My father scoffed. "I'm not required." Ramirez cut in, calm but sharper. "Sir, you are being accused of attempted fraud and extortion on a business premises. Provide identification or you will be detained while we verify." My father's face went a shade darker. He reached into his coat and yanked out his wallet with the particular fury of a man who has never been asked for his papers in his life. Officer Chen took the ID. "Daniel Pierce," he read aloud. Then he turned to me careful. "Ma'am, there's an active report attached to your father's name from another address. The same kind. Filing interference and attempted control." My stomach tightened. I nodded once. "We can talk in the back." Officer Ramirez guided my parents and Leia outside, while Chen followed me to the small office behind the counter. Elliot stepped in as well, closing the door softly. The muffled sounds of the cafe returned on the other side of the wall. Espresso hiss. Low conversation. Someone typing. Life trying to continue while my family tried to dismantle mine. There's an earlier complaint tied to your father, Chen said. Different location, different business, similar behavior. Attempted filings, coercion. A small boutique across town. Owner reported pressure to sign over ownership interest. When she refused, an unauthorized filing attempt was detected through the state portal. I didn't look surprised. I looked tired. So he's been doing this to other people, I said. Or trying, Chin replied. And now we have multiple incidents with the same pattern, filing attempts using public Wi-Fi, pushing for control changes. Elliot added a note to his clipboard. With today's submission reference, we can link the activity to a person, not just a network. Especially with CCTV and the physical presence at the counter. What do you think my father did next? Option A, he finally apologized. Option B, he doubled down and tried to deny everything. Option C, he tried to have the whole thing dismissed as a family misunderstanding. Drop A, B, or C in the comments. Because what happened outside, I'll tell you right now. I walked out from behind the counter and faced the room. My customers had gone quiet the way people do when they've witnessed something they'll think about later. Sorry about that, I said to the room. Voice steady. Drinks are on track. Nina will take care of you. Nina met my eyes and nodded. She didn't look scared. She looked proud. I stepped outside. My father was pacing near the curb. My mother stood stiff, face tight. Leia was crying quietly, phone clutched like a lifeline. Officer Ramirez held her notebook and spoke to my father without invitation for negotiation. You've been trespassed. Leave the area. This is insane, my father said. She stole from us. She owes us. We gave her everything. You gave me 4 years of silence, I said calmly. He spun toward me. We gave you your start. We paid for your first equipment. I didn't argue. I didn't correct the lie with emotion. I pulled a small folder from my coat, thin, plain, not dramatic, and held it up. Officer Ramirez, I'd like to file a report for attempted extortion and attempted fraudulent business filing. I also want the officer's body cameras preserved. The cameras inside capture the counter area and the filing attempt moment. Ramirez nodded. We'll document. My father's jaw clenched. You're really doing this? Yes, I replied. He stepped closer. You think you can ruin me with paperwork, he said, dropping his voice. I can ruin you with one call. I know people. Officer Chin stepped between us automatically. My mother finally spoke. Her voice sharp and cold. You're going to regret this, she said. You'll be alone again. Nobody will want you. I held her gaze. I'd rather be alone, I said, than owned. Officer Ramirez finished the trespass documentation and handed my father the warning. Signed, she said. He scribbled his name with a furious swipe. As they started walking away, Elliot Crane stepped out beside the officers. Sir, he called to my father. Calm. Crisp. One more thing. My father turned, irritated. What? Your filing attempt reference number is now flagged, Elliot said. It will be cross-linked with the earlier complaint. Any further attempt to change control of an entity you do not own will trigger an automatic fraud review and law enforcement notification. You're threatening me, my father said. No, Elliot replied. I'm informing you. My father looked like he wanted to explode. But there were uniforms. There were cameras. There were customers watching from inside through the glass. So he did the only thing he had left. He left. 2 days later, my registered agent forwarded me the official incident packet, the attempted change of control submission, the network source information, the reference number, and the fraud flag status that had prevented the filing from ever being accepted. My attorney sent a formal preservation letter to the Secretary of State's office and to the Filings Compliance Unit, ensuring the submission logs and authentication attempts were retained. The police report from my shop was not treated as a family dispute because the earlier boutique complaint already existed. Once investigators saw the pattern, same coercion language, same sign over a percentage, same attempted filing from public Wi-Fi, they opened a case for repeated attempted fraud. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a method. Within a week, my father was served with a restraining order that barred him from my business, my building, and my residence. The order included a specific clause about interference with business operations and attempted administrative control. He hated that wording more than the distance, because it named what he was. My mother tried the old routes, calling relatives, sending messages about forgiveness and family unity. It didn't land the way it used to. Not after the body cameras existed. Not after the filings record existed. Not after my customers had watched her smile at them like she owned my counters. Leia deleted her filming attempts the same night officers took her statement. But the building cameras and the portal logs were already preserved. She wasn't charged, but she was documented. That was enough to stop her from using my life as content again. My father tried one more move, quietly, through an email that appeared to be from a business consultant offering a strategic partnership. The consultant email traced back to a domain he'd registered. My attorney added it to the case file. The investigating officer called him directly. That was the moment he finally understood. Every move he made created another timestamp. The coffee shop didn't suffer. It got stronger. Customers who witnessed the scene came back. Some left extra tips. One woman slid a handwritten note across the counter that said, "Thank you for staying calm." That's what real power looks like. I didn't frame it. I kept it in the same drawer as my lease, my permits, and the filing alerts. Proof that my life is no longer built on anyone's approval. 6 months after that Tuesday, I opened a second location. Smaller, a corner unit in the Selwood neighborhood. Ironically, the same stretch where Ray owned another property. I leased that one the traditional way. Clean paperwork. Approved permits. Opening day, Priya came for the first hour, and we stood behind the counter together and watched the morning regulars find their seats like they'd always known where they were. "You good?" Priya asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." And I meant it in the specific way that takes years to earn. Not the performed goodness of someone trying to convince themselves. The quiet kind. The kind that lives in your body when the things you were afraid of have finally been named and documented and handled, and you woke up on the other side, still standing. My father called once, 3 months after the restraining order was lifted. A number I didn't recognize, which meant he'd gotten a new phone or borrowed one. I saw the area code. I let it ring. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something older and more useful. Clarity. My mother wrote a letter. It arrived in my mailbox on a Saturday, handwritten, no return address. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. I set it on my kitchen counter for 11 days before I opened it. It wasn't a long letter. She said, "I should have protected you." I didn't. That's on me. No excuses. No, but your father. No request for anything in return. I read it twice. Then I put it in the same drawer. Maybe someday. Not today. Forgiveness isn't a deadline. It's a process. And I'm allowed to take my time. What I know is this. My grandmother said something to me over lunch after my college graduation. In that small restaurant near campus, sun coming through the windows, her hands wrapped around mine. She said, when they finally see your worth, it will be too late for them. I used to hear that as a warning. A prophecy of loss. I understand now that it was something else. It was permission. Permission to build the thing without waiting for their blessing. Permission to stop measuring my progress by whether they'd noticed it. Permission to walk through a door they didn't open and build the life that was always mine to build. I planted peonies in a window box on my apartment porch this spring. The same variety my grandmother grew in her garden in southeast Portland. I didn't know if they'd take. I've never been a gardener. But they came up in May, pink and absurd and unapologetic. Just like she said they would. If you're watching this and you've been the invisible child, the one who did the work without the credit, the one who called and wasn't answered, the one who built something and had someone try to walk in and claim it, I want you to know something. Your worth was never theirs to assign. The boundaries you set are not revenge. They are architecture. They are the walls that make a house a home instead of just a structure anyone can walk through. You don't owe forgiveness on their timeline. You don't owe access to the life you built without them. You don't owe anyone a seat at the table they refused to give you. Did I get revenge? No. Revenge is destruction, and I have never had any interest in destroying anything. What I got was something better. Evidence. paper trails, timestamps, a building with my name on the deed, and a coffee shop full of people who come back because they want to. That's not revenge. That's architecture. And that is something no one can ever take away. If this story resonated with you, if you've had someone try to walk into something you built and treat it like it was already theirs, drop a comment. Tell me your story, or just let me know you're here. Knowing I'm not alone in this means more than I can say. And if you want to know how the second location's doing, or what eventually happened with my mother's letter, subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll be here,